Okay, welcome everyone. This is the preseason coaches webinar for Alpine skiing, going into the finishing out the year of 2020 and heading into 2021. One of the things I do want to mention up front is, as you all are aware, we're going through the pandemic and the COVID situations. If you have questions, please hold those till the end, or you can put them in the chat box, which I will touch on in a minute. But we may not have the answers to all the questions you guys may have. If we don't, we'll take note of them and communicate accordingly once that information is available. So again, we're all in this together. A lot of challenges that we've dealt through so far this year and leading into the new year. So we'll continue to monitor all the situations. One of the things we'll do today is go over the basics of Zoom. So as I mentioned, if you look down at the bottom of your screen, mostly, I think that's where it's located. Some, depending on your format, some may be to the right of the screen, but you'll see a little chat and a chat box there. You click on that and you can enter your questions there, and we'll be monitoring that throughout. Participants, that's also where you can mute or unmute yourself when we ask you to do so. So don't just do that in the middle of the webinar. For sake of everyone's time, we can get through the information that needs to be covered. We'll talk about the return to activity protocols, what's been in place at this point, moving forward in regards to getting in place with your athletes and partners, et cetera, as coaches. We'll talk about Alpine skiing as it relates to us right now, knowing that things could possibly change. And then we'll hit the resources as normal, with all the deadlines, timelines, requirements, paperwork, et cetera. That's similar requirements in the past. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started.
Thanks, Steve. I'll go ahead. I appreciate you guys taking the time. This first section, which we'll go over with as far as the protocols and return to activity and such, are pretty consistent for all the different sports. There, of course, are different nuances and such with that. But we did want to let you know the current status on the chance that maybe you hadn't heard as yet. So we are encouraging programs to conduct virtual and in-person dryland training as conditions permit. I know several programs are doing a virtual training, utilizing either their own Zoom account or their area's Zoom account, or there's a free Zoom that you can utilize for, I think it's 40 minutes per session and such with that. In addition, we will have out in the very near future a virtual training guide for specifically for alpine skiing. We've been putting them out for sports as we can have them developed, which will give you, it's an 8 to 10 week training program that you can do entirely virtually. Of course, it's obviously going to be mostly around dryland and conditioning and that type of thing, but that'll be there and that'll be available for you as well on the chance that you're not able to get out onto the snow. In addition, given the different protocols and the different phases and such that we'll walk through shortly, but wanted to hit this up front, we are not able to have any kind of an event that has an overnight stay until we are essentially back to normal as part of our overall process. In addition, as we'll talk through with distancing that's necessary and direct contact that's not permitted in certain situations, we came to the conclusion with a lot of input from our area leaders that we would not hold a Winter Games in 2021 as we have had previously. That said, it is our intent, if conditions allow, to have on snow training opportunities, the two that were scheduled previously, and then in addition have one the weekend of what would have been Winter Games. So we'll touch on that in a bit there. That's all under the assumption or the hope that conditions allow. Right now, as we'll touch on in a few slides, we really can't do anything. So the document that you see here is our return to activities protocol. It's available on our website, and I think Ryan will, when we send the slides out post-event or post-session here, we'll include a copy of that latest version there as well. or at least a link to it, and I encourage you to read through that. That goes into much more detail than what we're covering here, and has some specific sections for some sports, and again has all the forms and such that we'll go over here. So to return to activity, as most of you know, we shut down completely in the middle of March. And then starting in the summer, we started having some activities come back, and it's through a series of protocols that are nationwide. We, of course, put a little nuance on them here in Maryland, as each state does. But they're pretty consistent across the country. But one key thing here in terms of something coming back to activity, or you having any type of in-person program, is you need to work directly with your area leadership. We have a couple area leaders on tonight, and they are well versed. They've been an active part of any decisions and developing these plans, and they need to be the ones to make a decision with that. Following the protocol that we're going through is not an option. It's not a suggestion. It is an absolute requirement. You can't offer any training in the name of Special Olympics without following those protocols. I mentioned about the most recent return to activities protocol. That guide that's there, that's been updated as of the end of October. And as new things come on, we'll update that, and it'll be at that same location. The link down there at the bottom of the slide of virtualsomd.com/return to play. We'll go through here in terms of various different forms and things that have to go through. That is all in addition to the standard athlete medicals, volunteer applications, and certifications that are required. We will talk through the phases, but every program is going to start and has restarted now in phase 1 of the protocol, and progress from there. As of today, every county, every area in the state is in what we call phase 1, which is the very beginning, given the rise in incidents and cases and such there. And as Steve mentioned, this is an evolving process, so stuff's going to change. We think we've got it down now to a pretty good package, so we wouldn't expect major changes other than, of course, things that are out of our control. So we have provided and recorded Jeff Abel. Many of you know Jeff, along with Adam Hayes and some other athlete leaders, created some webinars to help athletes in learning the protocols. Those are listed there. The first 2 are in sequence, and then the third is sort of a review as I think it's a Jeopardy style game. It's some type of a game setup that they've got there. So these links, and they also are available on that return to activity or return to play page, where the link is down at the bottom. But you can share these with your athletes, and they can watch them, and that can help for those who can benefit from that, can help in understanding what's happening and what the different requirements are. So again, I mentioned about that. So this covers all in-person activities with athletes, so trainings, competitions of any kind, meetings, repeat there about it's absolutely required. If you walk out with nothing else, know that these protocols are required after tonight. We will follow the requirements of Special Olympics Maryland, the state of Maryland, and or your local jurisdiction, your local county, for example, whichever is the most restrictive. So if, as things change, and that's going to vary somewhat in different counties in the state, and particularly in terms of the number of people who can be together in a place. But that's going to vary again as the government changes. Right now, we had been more restrictive up until about the middle of October, end of October, and then with some shifts with, again, the increase in incident level. Right now, on November 24th, the state government requirements are more restrictive. We'll talk through different groups and such, but right now there is a Maryland restriction on outdoor groups of up to 25. And with all areas being in phase 1, which we'll see on the next slide, Just want to let you know that there are limits to the number of outdoor groups that can be there. We'll talk through that in just a moment. Should also note, as most of you know, we have a very active school system program. And of course, the schools are dealing with the situation themselves. In school systems, they follow, because they're essentially running the program for us, they will follow the requirements of the school system, which may be different than what the requirements are for our community program here. So don't be surprised if you see some variation, if there's some either on Facebook or TV, whatever the case may be. There might be some variation in terms of what's happening in the school system compared to what's happening in the community program. So that's to be expected and such. Also, there is nothing that says you have to start back up. The decisions are being made on an area by area basis with the area director. In some cases, some areas have opted not to do anything for a while or did one sport in the fall. Others tried 3 or 4 sports. In some cases, they started some but decided not to go with others. That's going to vary based on both the situation as well as the concerns that coaches and athletes may have within a given sport. That's okay. But key thing is everything's being driven through your area. So the phases, this is a 4-phase program with up to phase 3. Phase 0, we hopefully will not be back into that, but that is, there's a stay-at-home order effectively for the state, and really no program, no in-person programming can happen. We were in that situation, quite frankly, for the first 3 months or so of the pandemic. Right now, everyone is in this phase 1. So there is a lifting. There are some restrictions on size. Within Maryland now, it's, I believe, 10 people indoors, a max of 10 people indoors, and a max of 25 people outdoors. So within that, you can have programming that is, it includes 10 or fewer people. And when we say people there, 10 or fewer participants, we're not talking 10 or fewer athletes. That is a total of 10 or fewer people. So it includes athletes, that includes unified partners if you have them, that includes coaches, volunteers, etc., in person at the same location. It would also include any family members or agency personnel who are hanging around near where you're doing your training. What you can do, I alluded to this on the earlier slide, you can have more than one group of 10 people at the same location as long as they are physically distant, we say about 50 meters apart, and as long as they don't intermingle, basically that they stay intact as basic little pods separated from each other. So that's where I was saying right now, given the state government's limitation of no more than 25 people in a gathering, they don't make the nuance like we do of 2 subgroups. You could have, if you opted to have something in person, as I know, I think Montgomery County is doing some in-person dry land, at least for snow showing, and maybe doing it for Alpine as well, out in the park. You could have 2 small groups of up to 10 people as long as they're distant. You couldn't have more than that because then that would exceed potentially the state requirement, government limit of 25. Throughout, you need to maintain physical distancing of 6 feet at all times. Certainly, if there is an emergency and someone is injured, this came up in a call or a session with a previous sport, of course, administer first aid. There's a certain level of common sense that we need to apply here. But other than that kind of a situation, 6-foot distance is required throughout, mask wearing and so on, but we'll talk about mask wearing in a bit. Also in phase 1, no direct or indirect contact is permitted. When we talk about direct contact, that is one person touching another person. Indirect contact is one person touches an object, this pen, and then the other person touches it without being wiped down or sanitized. In phase 1, You can't have direct contact, and you also can't have indirect contact. So imagine for a team sport like soccer, you couldn't be passing, or flag football, you couldn't be passing a ball back and forth in phase one. There's similar things, of course, here within skiing as well. And then also no shared equipment without disinfecting. As is the case at all at phase one and phase two, there's a pre-screening that we'll walk through that must take place. When we shift to phase two, so things have gotten a little better, and there's variations. I think the metric that we use is 7 days with an incident rate of 10 or fewer than 10 cases per 100,000. Don't quote me on that. There's a little, there's a tool that we utilize for that. But in phase two, the size restrictions go up to 50 people. So 50 people or fewer, assuming the state government or your local government hasn't restricted it further than that. But for Special Olympics, we say you can go up to 50. With that, the physical distancing is still there, as is the ban or inability to have any direct contact, but indirect contact may resume. Okay. Now, also, one of the things that we're saying here with direct contact and the physical distancing, if two people live together, parent and son or daughter, or house counselor with folks and all there, that can be adjusted as far as that goes. So as an example, for golf this past fall, we were able to have some competitions where the golfer and his partner or her partner were family members, and they could ride in a golf cart together, because you really can't get 6 feet apart within a golf cart. But there, because they live together, that was permitted. So there could be some, and as we talk through some stuff on equipment later, there's a component with that where that may be a bit of a saving grace for those athletes that need assistance getting their equipment on. So, and again, but anyhow, so with phase two, 50 people or fewer, if the government is permitting that, physical distance is still required and no direct contact, but indirect contact can resume. And then phase three is essentially everything is back to normal for all intents and purposes. Note that the double-headed arrow that's there, it can go up and it can go back down. We were in beginning of October, maybe mid-October, we had probably a third to a half of our counties in phase two. And now with the increase in incidents that's being reported, we had to slide everybody is back now in phase one. Again, that's possible throughout the entire time when we're going through. I'm not going to read this to you. There's 2 slides that kind of walk through for each phase. I encourage you to read these when you get them. That kind of walks through in a little bit more detail some of the stuff that we just talked about, as well as things to suggestions in preparing. One of the themes that's throughout here is educating and making aware your athletes, your volunteers, your family members ahead of time. That's where utilizing something like Zoom or Google Meets or whatever provider you prefer, and having some sessions in advance to kind of walk through all this can be very helpful, so that when you get there in person, assuming you can get to that in person, everyone is a little bit more aware and ready to participate and comply with what's required with there. And all this compliance, it's all about safety, but it is stuff that's required. So please read through this at your when you get the stuff. So that said, fingers crossed. We're going to watch a little video. It actually stars some of our athletes and a couple coaches from Maryland, so you'll recognize some faces.
In order to safely return to activity, Special Olympics recommends that participants wear a mask if on public transport, such as a bus, trolley, subway, or if carpooling with someone not living with them. If Special Olympics is providing transportation, face masks during travel and maintaining physical distance are required. Prior to entering any activity, practice, event, or gathering, all athletes, coaches, unified partners, volunteers, family members, and caregivers must participate in an on-site screening. It is important to take the necessary steps to create a safe on-site screening area. 1. Create a single point of entry. One entryway that allows participants to enter one at a time. Remember, we strongly advise outdoor spaces only in Phase 1. 2. Use chalk, tape, cones, or other markers to indicate what 6 feet or 2 meters looks like for physical distancing. 3. Make sure you have all the necessary supplies for a proper screening, which include temporal thermometer, pens, masks, gloves, disinfectant wipes or spray, hand sanitizer, COVID-19 participant code of conduct and risk assessment forms. Volunteers will fill out a monitoring form for each participant that passes through screening. The form includes the participant's name, contact info, temperature, answers to screening questions, and the outcome of the screening. For instance, can they participate or have they been isolated and sent home? Next, you will ask each participant the following required screening questions. We recommend using visual aids when asking the questions. 1. In the last 14 days, have you had contact with someone who has been sick with COVID-19? 2. Have you had a fever in the last week? Temperature of 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, 37.8 degrees Celsius, or higher? 3. Do you have a cough and/or difficulty breathing? 4. Do you have any other signs or new symptoms of COVID-19? Fatigue, muscle or body aches, headache, new loss of taste or smell, sore throat, congestion or runny nose, nausea or vomiting, or diarrhea.
In the past 14 days, have you had contact with someone who has been sick with COVID?
Yes.
Yes, you have? Okay, so I'm gonna actually have you step down here.
If a participant answers yes to any questions, they must be isolated from the group, sent home, and instructed to contact their healthcare provider. Participants who are found to have COVID-19 symptoms must wait 7 days after symptoms resolve to return to activity, or must provide written proof of physician clearance to Special Olympics to return to activities. Participants who test positive or have COVID-19 must provide written medical clearance before returning to sport and fitness activities. After answering the screening questions, you will conduct on-site measurement of participants' temperatures using a thermometer, preferably a non-touch thermal scanning one if possible. If a thermometer is not available, you must ask participants to self-monitor and provide results of that monitoring. If there are any concerns about fever, temperature of 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, 37.8 degrees Celsius, or higher, the participant should not be allowed to remain on site. If high, you may retest the participant after 5 minutes to ensure temperature is accurate. Record all names, results, and contact information using the template provided, and keep in case needed for contact tracing or reporting. For more information on Special Olympics Return to Activity Protocol and Safety Guidelines, visit resources.specialolympics.org or consult your local program.
Okay. 2 quick points to follow up on that because these questions come up. The question there in terms of transportation and such, one of the things, if you were listening, if you may have missed this, they were making the distinction between a carpool where the athletes or families are doing it on their own and Special Olympics providing transportation. It's considered Special Olympics providing transportation if we're providing a bus, or if a coach or other Special Olympics volunteer is providing the transportation. And so for that reason, in general, we are not providing the transportation for this because you're not going to be able to get the distance there. Also, one of the notes with this, it showed you the screenings and such, and this was at a nice pavilion at a park in Howard County. As you're doing your layout and as you are arranging this, and again, talk to your areas. Virtually every area has had something start up and has gone through this process, if you can do the screening either at the parking lot or at their cars or such, it makes life a lot easier on the chance that you have someone who is who you need to have depart because of a high temperature or not passing the screening. So to the extent that you can do it as close to there, if you can do it at their cars, that's even better if you can work that out. Again, your facilities will vary with that. And Jeff did, I said 50 meters. Jeff did make a point there. It's 50 feet, and I apologize. And I do want to do a shout out to Jeff Hagan. He's been one of the folks on the task force that we've had working through all of these things.
In order to safely...
Sorry. Okay.
Mike, if I can jump in real quick, another distinction I want to make is they talked about when you take your temperature, if it's high, you can take a 5-minute break and come back. And I only mention this because at our last golf outing, one of the individuals came and their heat was blaring in the car prior to arrival. So during the winter time, we did give the individual about 7 minutes and came back and the temperature read was fine. So just be aware of that. Don't be real alarmed if the temperature is read high right at the initial gate when people are coming out of their cars with the heater going. So thank you.
Okay. The other note I think is, if they're lugging their equipment or whatever to up there, they're going to expend energy, and there's a likelihood of it being higher as well. So anyway, there's a summary here of what was covered in there. You've got your questions of, have you been in contact with someone who's been sick with COVID? Have you had a fever in the last week? Do you have a cough or difficulty breathing? And then the fourth question, just some clarity on that. It lists those different symptoms that are there. If the person has a chronic condition so that they are always, I'll use myself as an example. I have, since I was 19, I have major sinus problems. And so I am always going to answer almost all the time that, yes, I have congestion or a runny nose. If it's a chronic situation, that does not count as a no for the purposes of this screening. It's something that's different from what is normal for them. But they need to be able to, with that little nuance or caveat there, they need to answer all 4 of those questions as no. And then the mention there about the temperature check. Ryan, if you can go ahead and launch that first poll, that would be great.
Yep.
Okay.
And you should see it on your screen now.
Okay. Actually, I think I think we do all 3 polls here because I blew past the slide that we had the other 2. So if you could read through the question there, and just as a little check here, check off all of the ones that are there that would be permitted when a program's operating in phase 1. Okay, and I apologize that we blew past that. I was trying to be respectful of folks' time. Yeah, Ryan, let's let it run until, and remember to hit submit when you're done also after you've checked them off. Let's be sure we get at least 15 or so in there. If on your screen you don't see, the last one that you should see says soccer players take shots at soccer goal while assistant coach acts as a goalie. You may have to scroll down to see that last one. Okay, another couple seconds with that.
Halfway there, Mike.
I was going to mention something when you were picking on me before we started, Mike, about you skipping the first poll, but good cover.
Okay. That's good. Let's go ahead and close it, Ryan. If anyone did not get to submit it, that's okay. So let's see here. Great. No one did either the first 2. Both of those would not be permitted in phase 1 for either distancing or direct contact and such. the coach demonstrates proper skill. And I'm sorry, can you share the results, Ryan, also, so folks can see that? Thank you. Demonstrating the skill from a distance of 8 feet, that's great. Using the poly spots 6 feet apart, that's certainly would be permitted. Throwing a football back and forth, the distance is irrelevant there because there's indirect contact and you can't do that in phase 1. Great, everybody did wonderful here. Kicking to an open goal would be good, would be fine because they're not touching anything. They'd have to retrieve their own ball. So if anybody didn't check that off because they thought somebody had to kick it back to them, fine. And then soccer players, having that goalie in there would not be permitted in phase 1 unless the goalie does absolutely nothing but just stand there. Okay, let's go ahead and do the second poll. So, okay, and again, same thing. The last item should be, you may have to scroll down, for family members who observe training location and space from 50 meters away. But here you're checking off all those who are counted in the total when we say 10 people or fewer, or 50 people or fewer, who all contributes or counts into that, that figure. Okay. Let's give it another couple seconds. And okay, Ryan, let's go ahead and close that and share it. And looks really good. Yep, the athletes, the partners, the assistant coaches, the head coaches, they're all counting there. Volunteers that are out that space also count. Family members who stay in their car, great. Nobody had that down. Those people aren't counted. They're not in the vicinity of where your group is. However, with that next to the last one, if they come down to that training area and are kind of hovering at the edge, they are counted in that 10 or fewer or 50 or fewer or whatever the number happens to be. And then if they're 50 meters away or 50 feet away, if they're observing from a distance, they are not counted in there. So great. Okay, and let's get that last one up, Ryan. Thanks, and then we can chuck through the rest. Okay, so here so here you're going to check off everything that's true. And the last one, in case it's scrolled past the bottom, you should see it is advisable to have the pre-screening area located near the parking area if possible. I think I heard that somewhere. So. And remember to hit submit after you've checked off all the ones that are true. Okay, another couple seconds. Okay. And let's go ahead and share that. So looks like we did great here. So the first one, no, they have to answer all 4 questions no. They do get a chance to recheck if they exceed that temperature. Only athletes, not just athletes and partners. We went through on the previous screen that there was a bunch. Using a no-touch thermometer. One note with that, who's ever doing your screening, and your area may have already arranged for people to do the screening, but make sure they're familiar with that thermometer. The ones we provided and also the ones anybody might buy, they can be a little touchy, and if you haven't used them before, it may take a little bit of playing with them to get them to work right. But yeah, also you may need to have some shade to read it. Okay. And then also the last one, it is advisable. So great. Go ahead, Ryan, you can shut that down. Fantastic, folks. And so thank you for letting me pass on skipping the couple polls that we had initially. So mentioned before, everyone's in phase 1, and then after they've been in phase 1, they can move ahead to, after a minimum of 2 weeks, Right now, everybody is in phase one. Not going to go into what is necessary to move out of phase one, or if you get in phase two to move back to phase one. Your area will keep you posted on that. So, and again, we're going to follow the guidelines, et cetera, before we move up. And then we have that grid that I showed you before. Again, read through that. I mentioned before about the most restrictive that we have. So we're usually talking with our population about the least restrictive environment. Here, we are talking about the most restrictive in terms of the protocol. And it is the area leadership along with SOMD that's going to make a determination as to what phase you are in for your county. It's not something a coach would make independently. And again, that's going to be decided area by area. So again, your area leaders, your area directors are very familiar with this and work with them. They can be very supportive. And, you know, it may also be the case that you can't do anything in person. And while it's disappointing, it's okay. We have to do what's safe. So,
and Mike, real
yes,
quick, sorry to interrupt. We did have a question from the group in regards to family members who are not down with the group as far as 10 people or less, but are back away with that 50 feet. And the family members are now—
that's a great question.
10.
Okay.
I think I know the answer, but I will throw it to you unless you want me to answer.
The answer is they have to scatter. Yeah, that's the first time anybody's asked that question, but Crystal, that's a great question. You're absolutely, yeah. So it doesn't do any good to have, well, it does good to have our athletes in groups of 10 separated, but then to have 50 parents together, you know, unless they're a family of 50 who live together, yeah, you know, that just doesn't work. So great question with that. Cool. Going forward, as you saw in the video there, if anybody answers yes to any of the questions or has a temperature, have them isolated from the group, they will need to go home and then follow that protocol that we mentioned before, that was mentioned in the video and is in the guide of and here about waiting at least 7 days after 7 days of being symptom-free, effectively 14 days. We are not saying that they have to self-quarantine for 14 days. Although that may be necessary if they do have COVID or have been exposed. That's not Special Olympics policy here. We're just managing when they can come back to the program. And then again, if they've tested positive, they do need written documentation that they've been cleared by their medical professional. So, acknowledgement of risk. There is a form that we will show you in a moment that everyone who participates, every athlete, partner, volunteer, a family member who's helping out, whatever, needs to complete. It's an acknowledgement of risk that clarifies or that demonstrates that they understand that participating during this time has some risks attached to it. It is not a waiver, but it is required. They have to fill it out once. So if they filled it out for soccer skills, which was something we were doing in the fall, they don't have to fill it out again for the for winter sports. It's captured in our computer system in GMS and can be printed out, or your areas have access to that information. With that, it also does not, at this point in time, and we don't anticipate this changing, it does not expire unless the person is a minor. Because basically their parents or their guardian is signing for them when they're a minor. When they become 18, they would need to do a new one because they are then an adult and are signing for themselves and so on. So, but it's a one-time deal. It's basically showing that they understand about high-risk populations, what's expected of them in terms of their in-person activities. And this can be used to some degree as a screening. If an athlete, read through those, it may well be the case that there are some athletes who are unable to participate during this time because they can't handle the social distancing or can't handle the no direct contact. It's not that they're being deliberately bad behavior or violating it. They just can't. They just can't do it. And if that's the case, as difficult as it may be, they unfortunately will not be able to participate. So this kind of helps you up front in laying out those expectations. This is one of those things that you could do ahead of time with a web session or a session like this. You can send it out to them, they can fill it out, and they can either send it in to you or bring it with them on the first practice. As with a medical and as with a volunteer application and protected behaviors and so on, they cannot start to participate in anything in person without having that completed and turned in. There's no, I'll get you next time. That is not an option. They need to fill that out and turn that in. Let's see. So we covered that part. This is what the form looks like. The stuff on the left is just the different things that they're saying that they understand. All we need back is the form, the page 2 that's on the right with their stuff filled out. And again, it's a one-time unless they happen to be under 18, and then just when they turn 18 with that. That form is in the packet that we'll send you. It's also available for download both at that virtual SOMD as well as at the Coach Resources page, which hopefully all of you have been using for the last couple of years. The Coach Resources page, when we're saying that, it's not necessarily on the Alpine page, it's on the main one. There's a whole section on forms and such for COVID. High-risk individuals, this just kind of goes through that. We are, as hopefully by now most people are aware, medical experts and epidemiologists are saying, excuse me, that folks who are over 60 or 65 or older or in a nursing home or long-term care facility, which can include a group home, tend to be at higher risk. Also, those with the underlying conditions that are listed there tend to be at higher risk of having greater complications or a more severe case of COVID. We are not saying that if they fall into one of those categories, heck, I can check off 2 or 3 of them myself. We are not saying if they fall into one of those categories that they can't participate. We are saying that they need to be aware and make a decision for themselves or their family make the decision with them, whatever. We are not banning anybody who has diabetes or has liver disease or lives in a group home. That is a decision that they'll make on their own. We are saying they must complete that acknowledgement of risk so that we know to the best that we can that they are aware of the risk and have chosen to participate nonetheless. Mention about the practice log. Your area leaders have this. Do not create your own. You must use the form that we have. That said, because you're going to use it at every practice, you can capture all the information for your folks and who the participants are, their contact information, that they've filled out the acknowledgement form, and duplicate that. And then for each practice, you can check off that they've been screened and that they're fine on their symptoms. But you can't go and create your own thing. Sorry. We need to have them turned into us along with your acknowledgement of risk forms, please, also within a week of each practice session. So work out with your area. Your area has some process that they're dealing with. Typically it's give it to a certain person and he or she'll upload it there. We do need to get those. There was some slippage with that in the first go round, and we had to chase some of that stuff down. But again, it's a requirement. Strongly recommend. This is a great opportunity with this screening to have some volunteers maybe who aren't skiers, in your case, since we're talking skiing here, who aren't skiers or can't help directly in that regard. They could be your folks who are doing the screening for you. Okay, so let's go with another video. And it spins. Come on. Okay.
Preparing the venue to safely welcome Special Olympics participants is vital for return to activity for phases 1 and 2. Arrive early to prepare the space. Start by ensuring the venue is disinfected or sanitized, especially the bathrooms and other high-touch areas. Wear disposable gloves for all tasks in the cleaning process, including the handling of trash. After sanitizing the space, set up signage that reinforces proper hygiene procedures, physical distancing, and wearing personal protective equipment, or PPE. Post signs in easy-to-understand language with visual cues in highly visible locations, like entrances and restrooms. The signs should describe how to stop the spread of germs by properly washing hands, following physical distancing guidelines, and explaining how to properly wear a cloth face covering. Also, make sure hand sanitizer and/or hand washing facilities or stations are available. Lastly, set up a single entry with screening and a single exit area, which means there should be one entrance into the venue and one exit out of the venue that allows participants to be at least 2 meters or 6 feet apart. For more information on Special Olympics Return to Activity Protocol and Safety Guidelines, visit resources.specialolympics.org or consult your local program.
Great, and apologize that it was a little fuzzy there. We've had some issues with the links to some of the videos here. Should also point out that these are all, the videos themselves are on YouTube. There's links that are on that return to activity page, and the links here work as well. So you can certainly share them with your team, with your coaches, with your athletes, so on down the line. This is kind of redundant with what we talked about before. We're things that they should have on site. We've provided 2 thermometers and gloves and such to each program, and the areas can supplement with that. So work out again with your area director what you need. So face coverings. Read through this at your leisure. The gist of this is, in general, so take anything that's specific to a facility and put that on the side for a minute. In general, athletes, unified teammates, unified partners need to be wearing masks when they arrive, when they go through the check-in, up until the point that they actually start participating in some type of physical activity. At that point, they may remove their face masks and then put them back on when the activity is done. For everyone else, your coaches, your volunteers, and so on, they should be wearing face masks or face coverings throughout the entire time, unless they are then themselves participating in the physical activity, not just directing it, but going out and doing participating in the activity itself. That said, so that's on this slide and this slide that kind of talks through the whole thing. That said, some facilities, such as the Vail properties, which are, that's what Whitetail, Liberty, and Round Top are right now. Don't know about this for if anybody out in Western Maryland is going to WISP. I don't know with that. But they have more stringent requirements. And again, we follow whatever is the more stringent, more restrictive. So the standard, as we understand it right now at Whitetail, is that masks need to be worn at all times. So you would follow that. But again, when we're talking about in general, in terms of our requirements. So when you're doing dry land training in person, once you start the actual physical activity, the athletes and unified partners can remove. If the coaches are doing the activity along with the athletes, they can remove theirs as well. Again, still need to maintain that 6-foot distance at a minimum, no direct contact, so on, but they can take the face mask off. And then at the end of the session, when they've stopped, they've done their cool downs, put them back on. Okay. And our last video, let's hopefully this one will go off there with Mr. Joe Wu.
As a coach, you have a critical role in ensuring the safety of your participants. It is necessary to adapt some of your coaching strategies to lead safe practices under Special Olympics' new Return to Activity guidelines. Before each activity, communicate the need for high-risk individuals to participate at home, and have all participants complete the COVID-19 Participant Code of Conduct and Risk Assessment forms. Forms may be tracked in GMS if the program would like. During practice, it is important to maintain physical distancing of at least 6 feet or 2 meters between all participants. To do this, place markers on the ground to indicate what 6 feet is and have extra volunteers to remind participants to maintain their distance. We know it is difficult, but to ensure the safety of everyone participating, there are no fist bumps, high fives, hugs, or huddles right now during this COVID-19 pandemic. You can still support your friends and teammates by cheering each other on. All participants should come to the activity with their own supplies and cannot share masks, water bottles, towels, or uniforms. In Phase 2, the use of shared equipment is allowed, but should be limited. All equipment will be disinfected between each use. Wear face masks throughout activities, including arrivals and departures. Do not touch the outside of the mask. Do not scratch or touch your face. Masks do not need to be worn during active exercise. However, if sneezing, coughing, or yawning without a face mask on, participants should cover their faces with a tissue or elbow, not their hands, and throw away any tissues and wash their hands immediately. Throughout the activity, use verbal and visual signs to remind participants about hygiene, standard infection prevention, physical distancing, and use of personal protective equipment, or PPE. For more information on Special Olympics Return to Activity protocol and safety guidelines, visit resources.specialolympics.org or consult your local program.
So wanted to mention about some resources. Again, we mentioned about the webinars. The recordings now are available. They were previously for coaches. SOI, Special Olympics International, is working with national governing bodies and resources. The Special Olympics Maryland, we're creating some additional resources. I mentioned about the virtual training guide that can be utilized and working on having some dryland training discussions and opportunities as a part of coach training coming up. And then also we do a regular volunteer orientation for new volunteers and have gone over with them the screening protocol, so that can be helpful. Now, with alpine skiing, there are some specific nuances that or things that we need to talk through or need to be aware of. So first, for indoor activities, things are just tighter and the air is circulated more and so on. So I'm sorry, and I didn't edit out the bowling there, but we're still reviewing those. We're adjusting as we need to. Keep it to no more than 10 together. In many ways, particularly for this season for skiing, is going to be a lot more focused in on the things at the indoor policies at the facilities. Mentioned about Pennsylvania. So last, I guess that's Friday, their health department put into effect a requirement that effectively eliminates any kind of a day trip into Pennsylvania. In order to go into Pennsylvania from another state, you either have to have tested positive and have documentation of it no more than 72 hours prior to going into Pennsylvania, or once you go into Pennsylvania, you need to self-quarantine for 14 days. Not terribly practical in terms of going up to ski for an afternoon or a day. That is in place. Again, it went into place on Friday. They have no end date to it. Obviously, they're reacting or dealing with the different situations. It's in place or it's in effect indefinitely. We will certainly be keeping an eye on it. We are not canceling anything in terms of the on-snow opportunities that we are planning at this point because of that. As we get closer to them, certainly we will take that into consideration. Then also, And we'll include, there's a longer detail a list of things that we received from Whitetail, from Katrina, who has just been dynamite, Katrina Gaiman at Whitetail, in support of here. Because they are part of Vail Properties, as is Liberty and Round Top, these apply to all three of them. As I mentioned before, I'm not sure about Wisp, if there's anybody here from Garrett or Allegheny counties, but check with them. They likely have stuff that's similar. So, but we'll include the one pager that goes into more detail. This is just a summary here. What they have told us is, and these are likely, there may be changes, but do not count on that. For anybody, not just for a group, there are no walk-up purchases. Everyone must make an advance reservation, including folks who have season passes. That's a binding count when you make them. So if you're making reservations, or you decide you're going to take a group up on your own, as under normal or typical years, I should say, several areas do that. That all needs to be handled in advance with the purchase ahead of time. You check in, well, I don't have to go into the details where you check in, you'll deal with that later. But you need to have that ahead of time. They are not taking any walk-ups at all. You need to have a mask on throughout the property. They're operating at 50% capacity for their indoor facilities, which is a big, significant drop. What that translates to for us, and they've been very specific about this, is that we, not just headquarters, but anybody, will not be able to commandeer space as we've been able to do in the past, because they're getting in and out of, they're flowing through, and they need to have that ongoing capacity. So, I mean, you basically can have a table for as long as it takes to eat your lunch or to eat whatever it is that you have, and then you need to move on. So you can't reserve any space, anything like that. They do have, I guess, the lockers and the bins and all that type of stuff that they've had in the past, but no reserve, no holding of space. With that, at this point in time, individuals who are not participating in the skiing or snowshoeing won't be permitted to wait in the lodge. So that certainly adds a challenge for transportation and other issues. We know that. Again, they're doing what they can to open safely there. So typically family members would come up and sit, either where in the space that a county had commandeered, or sit down at the coffee shop, whatever, and read or whatever. Can't do that. They can stay in their car. And then we are still exploring some possible other options of where they could go nearby. Don't know that anything's going to come out of that. Realize that's a bit of a challenge. It is what it is. We need to deal with that. For the dates that we are hosting, we'll make the reservations. So, and I think on one of the slides, all of them are listed there. We'll make the reservations, but where before there was flexibility, and if somebody didn't show up, it wasn't a big deal. Here, because if we say we're going to have 50 people there, that is 50 people that they are 50 spots they are not selling to the public. So if we have any no-shows, we're going to be charged for them. So, and that's, quite frankly, that's only fair. Since we're keeping them from having other folks there, they're not allowing walk-ups to fill in the spots that are then vacant. So we need to be clear on what we've got. All of that stuff above is in addition to the standard protocols. So there's still going to have to be screening on site when people arrive. I can't tell you how we're going to do that yet, other than that we will, whether we'll have a tent down near the parking lot or something, I don't know. We're figuring that out. We will have, closer to the first on snow date that we actually can hold, we'll have a like our pre-competition webinars we would have in a normal year, where it preps you for what's going to happen on site. We will have a similar one. We'll make a decision on the January date, which is, I think, January 9th. We'll make that probably before, at worst case, at the very beginning of January. So you'll know whether that's that, and then the next date would be the beginning of February. But we'll keep you posted on that, okay? So with that in mind, applying all this, just want to have a little chat discussion if we can. So if you could type into chat, given this information, and we're not trying to scare people, we just want to lay it out. This is what it is, and you may or may not be able to have an in-person ski program this year, and we understand that. But let's first talk about social distancing. You put into chat some thoughts that come into mind of what are the implications of that? How will that cause you to do something different than you've normally done? So let's just take a moment there and put them in. And Steve, if you can keep an eye out for, for summarizing and such with that.
Yep, gotcha.
Okay. Give some thought. I mean, if you don't do it now, you're going to be thinking about it when the time comes. So.
Yeah, a couple of them that are coming in now are, chair lifts. What are we doing about that? Athletes need to be self-sufficient, limited physical assistance with teaching. Obviously, we talked about the transportation of athletes to and from with caregivers, family members, Special Olympics, whatever. So good thoughts here. Greg Overcamp with the limited physical assistance with teaching, especially in phase 1. A lot of things go into that, Greg, for sure. Yeah, if another comment is, if they fall down on the slopes, they need to be able to be, again, going back to self-sufficient, kind of being able to get themselves back up to finish their run. Social distancing, again, putting on equipment of the athletes. I know snowshoeing is probably a little bit more on that issue than alpine skiing, but I know that can be as far as putting on and off your own skis or snowshoes.
Your boots alone. I mean,
yep.
A lot of people have trouble with that. Yeah.
Yep.
So, hold on a second. So, I mean, keep tossing them in there. We keep the chat. So, so part of this, I think that's all in line right now, because of the social distancing requirement and other challenges that are going to come with that. We are not planning on having athletes who do at the glide super glide level or events with adaptive equipment. That said, there may be a unique situation where, I don't know, the tetherer and the person who's helping the athlete get in and out of the adaptive equipment, they live together. I know that would be a very unique, not unheard of, but a unique situation there. The glide super glide, the physical sometimes having to catch the athlete and such, it's just not safe in order to do the social distancing. And I know that this means some of our lower ability athletes may not be able to participate in person. And it pains me no end, but these are the requirements that we have to live with there. So again, keep typing stuff in, other ones there. Again, they may need to be able to put on their boots or equipment by themselves. Or if they have a parent or a house counselor or a family member who lives with them, who's gone through all the certification requirements and can help them with that, then that's fine. I don't know that many of the family members without training would know how to do that themselves, but there are certainly some. Again, riding lifts are going to present specific challenges. It looks like the specific lift restrictions or what is and is not allowed are varying slightly. Well, actually, it'll vary based on what kind of lift it is. If it's a quad chair as opposed to something else, there's different things that are possible there. So, yeah, that's going to be a challenge. Whoops. Somehow that, I don't know, it jumped all the way down. I'm sorry, I'm going all the way back. So the way I've got it set up, I can't.
You're covering that pretty quick, Mike. Way to go, man. Making up time.
Yeah, well, I just skipped all the actual Alpine stuff. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so that I think covered. And then the same question, although there's some overlap here with what folks have put in, but thinking, so we talked about first the social distancing. What about no direct or indirect contact in phase 1? So the putting on the ski boots, that certainly applies there. Some other things that are involved there. Actually, Crystal, I see in there, Crystal said about getting lunch at the lodge. Yeah, think about, in many ways for skiing, for those athletes who can actually do some of that on their own, the real challenges are going to be the non-skiing parts of the whole process, such as getting lunch that they may not have, or administering meds and so on. But think about it, if there's anything else that comes to mind when we think about it from a no direct or indirect contact. Any other thoughts come to mind? So Steve, same deal. So they hear some voice other than mine. So.
Yeah, use of the restrooms and the other different facilities. Again, talking about if there's any situation where individuals and programs share helmets. We talked about the disinfectant in between the use. Mm-hmm. Not only during COVID, but that's a good practice regardless. One of the things I will talk about is, when we talk about lunches, again, we've been working with Katrina and Whitetail and their staff in regards to looking at, solutions to some of these challenges, provided we're able to be on site and have the opportunity to take people up there. Again, the lift tickets, and not just, or the bib numbers or whatever, as far as indicating our athletes and partners who are on the lifts, getting those on the jackets for individuals. A lot of challenges. And again, as Mike indicated earlier, this may preclude some individuals from having the opportunity. But again, we working together can hopefully resolve some of these challenges and come up with some good solutions.
Yeah, be creative. This is one of those situations where sometimes what may seem like a crazy idea can be adjusted to be something that actually is workable. So, and then just wrapping up, things for you to think about. We don't have time right now to talk through this, but how would you teach them to put their skis on or other equipment? Keeping your practice space together, whatever the case may be. I would encourage you, and I'm sure Ryan will touch on some of this, but encourage you to talk to other coaches and think through this. We can facilitate having additional conversation opportunities along these lines too. But if nothing else, know that the protocols are all required, and talk with your area leaders in terms of what you can and can't do. Sticking 100% virtual is okay. I think everybody would prefer to be out on the snow, but if we can't make that work for particular athletes or particular things, and looking out for your own health, if you, again, I mentioned I can check off a couple of those boxes on the higher risk myself. I'm sure many of our coaches here could as well. You don't want to, I know we have a lot of dedicated people here, but we don't want you to put your own safety at risk to a point where you're not comfortable. No one is asking you to do that. So unless there's any other questions with that, I'm going to hand this off to Ryan. Let me stop sharing, and then Ryan, you can go ahead and share. Okay, and Crystal, would Super Glide still practice virtually? Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, anyone that I think this was on one of the slides back at the very beginning. If you have an organized training program that you're doing virtually, they still would need to have their medicals and so on, as opposed to being some of the kind of pop in, do some stretches stuff that we've been hosting, which are still valuable in our virtual movement. But if it's an organized training program, they need to have their medical and stuff. But yeah, they can definitely do that. And this could be, what we're hopeful is some of the resources that we're creating, the sports management teams and such are creating here, can be utilized going forward for off-season work as well. The virtual training guides, we think, have that possibility. So I am going to shut my mouth. And Ryan, it's all yours and Matt's and Kathy's.
Mike, thank you very much for covering all that information. Coaches, area directors, thank you for being on tonight, being diligent on wanting to get updated with all the newest information, and most importantly, being flexible, as we all have to be this year, to provide the best year we can for the athletes. So along with me on the call tonight, I know that Kathy Cowdery she usually works with the officials, and she's the one giving the athletes some pointers when they're going down the slopes, and Matt Otwell, who helped set up the course, I believe may also be on. So as we go through here, please hold your questions till the end, just like before, and then we'll have a section for that where we'll address anything that we have not covered here. All right, so as a reminder, no athlete or volunteer may participate in any manner, and as we talked about before, that does include virtually, without a valid and current medical form or volunteer application certification. There's, again, no exceptions to this policy. So the deadlines here at the 2020 area director meeting earlier in November, we talked about no winter games, as we all know. So as a reminder, looking down here, what is due? Your roster needs to be entered into GMS, which will include all your athletes, partners, coaches, and volunteers participating. Every athlete must have a complete medical, valid through February 22nd. So referring to other years, that would be the final game or final day of winter games, if that kind of helps you understand it better. So every coach, partner, volunteer must have a complete volunteer application, updated protective behavior certification valid through that date also. And all coaches, volunteers must have the concussion certification in, and the coaches must have the sport-specific certification for their sport completed and submitted along with the CSOA. So that'll be showed out a little differently on another slide, but the dates you want to pay attention to here are the 21st of December, 1st of next year, the 28th, and then February 16th. So that's when all those forms need to be in based on those on-snow training dates. So this may be the first time that you've seen those. So jot those on-snow training dates down, even though we will cover them in the future. I believe the first two are Saturdays and the 21st is a Sunday. So we won't go through all this. That chart is everything that you've seen in the past besides the acknowledgement of risk. No matter who you are, that form needs to be complete. I would encourage that to be in well in advance. Some programs haven't even started until all those forms are into them, just to make sure that there's nothing that was missed there. So I would encourage you to do that. So training recommendations this year, obviously it's going to be a little different. There will not be any awards. So kind of stressing to your athletes and giving them the picture ahead of time. Yes, there won't be awards. Let's focus on making ourselves better for down the road. Any athlete wants something to strive towards, and not being able to see something down the road kind of hurts. So focus on, getting off your heels a little bit. Where should your poles be when you're going around those turns and everything? So stress that to them, make it clear about the awards. I know that we were setting up, trying to get some winter games medals for down the road at golf. And they said, oh, we have medals. Unfortunately, this year we do not. So let them know about that. And again, focus on looking down the road, fixing any technique that's not there, and just make them the best athletes that they can be. So as always, the training will take place at Whitetail Resort. The dates are the same that was listed before. The events that are offered will be the novice, intermediate, and advanced. So you got the advanced slalom along with the giant, the intermediate with the giant slalom for the intermediate level, and then the novice and the giant slalom for the novice level also. So again, that's everything but the glide and the super glide. George always does a great job over there. Unfortunately, most likely won't have that this year due to what we covered earlier, but those are the events that offer. They may change only because if we don't have any athletes signing up for one, we might not set it up. That would be the main reason you don't see that. If we only have one athlete or something, we may not set up the whole thing and try to work with them. What else would make sense? And you also see on another slide here what the setup of the slope looks like to have a better understanding of, even if we move it up a little higher, it could cater towards athletes that way. So the format of the day, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like at this point. It will be based off registration numbers like we talked about. There won't be any indoor seating for athletes or coaches. Again, the idea of parents potentially sitting in the car, bring some food maybe. I know if you take a right out of there, it's a little ways before you get to civilization again. So try to plan out your day, provide the athletes with the opportunity. And again, we'll try to follow up with you about other things in that area that you can do, for the parents can do, so they're not sitting around that whole day. Again, it'll most likely be in phase 1, and Whitetail at this time is operating at 50% capacity indoors. Screenings and check-in. So currently, just like any other sport, we'll have to have the screenings. We have not confirmed this with Whitetail, but those of you who have been there before, I just want to give you a general picture of what we're thinking. With that roundabout up top before you go up the giant stairs, it really tests your cardio. You pull in there. We're going to try to have the screening in the top left, so you can pull in, have your screening done. If you pass it and all the questions, you're set. You go back to the parking lot. Maybe you have a tag or something that says, you're all set. Sit in your car. You're part of Special Olympics. And if not, you can take that other loop out and just head right back out, based on if you pass the test or not. So that's just kind of what we're thinking. If anybody else has better ideas, I'm more than happy to hear them and pass them on to Katrina and see what works with everybody else. And again, masks must be worn at all times. So as soon as you leave your vehicle, please have that mask on. If not, you may be asked to leave the premises. So here's the map that you see usually each year. You have the Super G, which takes place up top, intermediate a little bit farther down for the stalker, novice on the left, and then the advanced course, which is on the right side of the slope, named Home Run there. So again, if that picture changes at all, which I think it has on the first On Snow last year, I had a little updated copy of it printed out, kind of made some changes of where you're going to go. I'll do the same this year. If we talk to them and they don't have snow up top or down bottom, we'll update you guys and make sure you're informed with everything you need to know. So if you do set up a course outside of coming on snow, which I hope you will, if you have that opportunity, this is what it will look like at our on snow trainings ideally. So refer to that if you're trying to set up a course on your own. So I'm not going to read through all this, but please make sure that your athlete's medications are all on file, that you have those forms printed out and you just keep them in a folder with you no matter where you go. That's really helpful if there's anything that comes up where you don't have, when you're not around a printer. I know that we do that on snow trainings just so we're not having to look through our computer and everything when an instance does come up. You try to be prepared and have access to everything like that in advance. So if there is an accident on the slope, the first person you need to call is not myself, not Mike, not Steve. It would be the medical team, which you will have the number for ahead of time. Please notify one of us after the fact. But during that time, please make sure that the other athletes are away from the injured athlete, and then pay attention to what's going on too at the same time, just so you can document everything at the end. That's very crucial also. But again, go to the ski team first, the ski patrol, make sure that they can get there as fast as they can. And once they're there and everything's settled down, then feel free to contact me. Please don't rush to it. If there's still stuff that you can take care of on site there with that athlete and making sure everybody's all right. And at the end of this slide deck, it'll also have that form for you if you want to refer to that. That again goes into some of the questions that may be on that form, or if they're not, what you want to be looking out for. Again, the more details, the better when any incident happens. So just some additional links. Many of these are also on the coach's resource page. It'll have all the rules, any updates. There are not any that are worth noting this year based on skiing, so that is good. But again, all those will be accessible online after this webinar is posted, along with the hard copy for anybody who wants to click through these. So I just wanted you to have access to the other sports directors also. You saw an email go out from Zach and I about a week or two ago regarding interest for on snow. Just so everyone knows, I want to say this in case I missed somebody's form. So far we have one from St. Mary's, Howard, and Carroll County. I believe either everyone else said no or they were doing something virtually, or they did not plan on coming to one of those dates. So if I did not name your county, please shoot me an email. Could have been something I missed. If not, the deadline was Monday, though, to have those into us. So again, if you have anybody, any other sports director you would like to reach out to, there's their contact information. All right, and at this time, we will open it up to anybody who has questions. If you have a question, you can either raise your hand here and we can unmute you, or the chat works well, and Kathy and I, or whoever can answer your question, will do so.
And Ryan, this is Steve Bennett. Just wanted to touch base. I know we talked a little bit previously before this, but in regards to, we talked about the events being offered, the novice, intermediate, and advanced slalom and giant slaloms. For those individuals who use adaptive equipment, due to the challenges at this time, those individuals and those events would not necessarily be offered unless you have any more updates on that, right?
I don't. So that is where we stand at this time. Thanks, Steve.
Okay. And as always, if there's extenuating circumstances, reach out to us. We'll talk through the situations with you, but obviously with the tetherers and all the challenges that go along with that with social distancing, really hard to figure out a way to do that, but we're always open to suggestions. While we're waiting for anybody else, again, I want to speak for Ryan and Kathy Cowdery, who's one of our main Alpine management team members. Is there anything you want to add? I know you weren't able to join us initially, Kathy, but wanted to give you a chance to address the coaches and anything you'd like to share. If you're still on, and you may be self-muted. I'll speak for Kathy too. Kathy says hello and thank you all for being on the webinar tonight, coaches. George Herganon, former CFO and current sport director for Winter Games from a volunteer's perspective. Anything you'd like to add, George?
No, I think you've all covered it very well tonight. I'm a little amazed at how much has changed since our last management team meeting. So obviously, this is going to be updated several more times. We really all want to put on something. We want to do something on snow. We'll do our best, but we just have to live within the restrictions that come from 2 states and from Special Olympics. So we will do our best, and hopefully we will see you on snow sometime this year.
Thanks, George. Ryan, I apologize. I was handling something else for a moment. If you said this already, but in terms of some dryland coach training and getting together, that we'll schedule something and we'll have a date out in the very near future on like in the next couple days. That
is the plan. Kathy, if you were available, I wanted to snag you for a second just to see what your availability would be for that. But yeah, so in the coming week or so, I'll send out the email that shows all the expiring medicals and everything like that to the area directors. But with that email, I also want to include some dates that we plan on doing some in-person classroom trainings, which will go over dryland training and everything else like that too.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the other things I'll mention is I really do want to commend our partnership with Whitetail and the Vail Properties, continuously working with us on finding solutions, etc. One of the things I will mention is hopefully soon, when we're able to cross the borders and get up there to Round Top Liberty and especially Whitetail, they have extended the typical discounted rates for Special Olympics. Those prices at this point are $25 for just the lift ticket, $35 for lift and rental equipment. At this time, again, you have to call in advance for reservations, no walk-ups, and you have to call the office. Do not go online for any of the 3 properties because currently there is no way to get the discounted rates online. So call the group sales office, mention you're with Special Olympics. Please do not pass that around to your friends who aren't Special Olympics so they get a discount. The one thing I do want to mention is typically we have the discount for the meals as well. For this year, at this point, that's going to be $10.50 only during the on-snow training dates. If you're going up and doing your own stuff, those meal discounted rates most likely will not be available. So just wanted you to be aware. But the rental equipment and lift tickets, they're continuing to honor the discounts they've provided in the past. So again, I want to commend Vail Properties and Whitetail, Liberty, and Round Top as well.
Clarissa asked the question about if an athlete can't answer the questions by themselves, they would need to have someone come in with them. Sending in a note really doesn't cut it. I know that might sound kind of nitpicky, but no, they would need to. That's one of the reasons why we recommend. I look like you had a drop off so you may not have been there for this. We recommend doing it right at the parking lot if you can. Or heck, you can do it as Ryan was saying. What we may be trying to do at Whitetail is they never even get out of the car. It's sort of a drive-through, if you will, screening that can be done, and that works. I don't know that any of our folks have done it, but talking with my colleagues around the Mid-Atlantic for other sports, they haven't started any of this. Doing that as they drive up before they even park, they do the screening, and then if it doesn't, that they can't stay, they can head right on out at that point. Be unfortunate, and luckily, knock on wood, we've had very few folks who've had to depart for that reason. Had a coach who did, but other than that, that's been very few.
As I'm typing here, a question was asked, who is the contact at Liberty, and probably some people may be asking at Round Top. Right now, I do not, or Special Olympics Maryland does not have a direct contact person at the other resorts, or really at Whitetail for these purposes. It's just been stated to call the group sales office. As far as I'm assuming, Mr. Marin, that was in regards to getting reservations.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, the instructions that we've been given is to call the group sales office, and again, just direct that. Okay. You are with Special Olympics, and if there's any questions with follow-up, let me know.
Yeah, Clarissa noted the name of an individual. It's probably just as easy, so you don't have to talk to that one person. The group sales offices are set up for this kind of thing, and that's probably the easiest. Just that you don't have to talk to Katrina Gaiman at Whitetail. Their team can take care of it.
Yeah, she will not have the time to take individual calls, but they've got it.
I'm sorry to see that Steve Martin is no longer touring. I guess that's hit him, as most entertainers. So, but he's found a place. Okay, I don't see any other questions, Steve. I think we've answered most of them there. I know the beginning of this was a fire hose of information. Hopefully your area shared with some of this beforehand, but we'll send all this out to you, including the one pager from Whitetail, the slide deck, I'll at least send you a link to the Return to Activities guide. We fully expect that you're going to have questions after you've had a chance to digest this, after you've had a chance to talk to folks. Please send them. Ryan's your first point, but Steve, myself, or any of the folks that's all great there. I would, though, if you are going to have a program, if that's something that's in the works for you, or in the cards for you rather, strongly recommend what I had said during the portion of have one or more web sessions or phone sessions or whatever, talking through folks before your first in-person session. In most cases, not all, but in most cases, the athlete or the family member of an athlete who's going to be able to participate can get online. We've had a couple hundred athletes joining every Saturday for dances and for social activities twice a week and so on. So a lot of our athletes do have access to the internet and are comfortable using Zoom. It really, really will help you and can answer a lot of the questions. And they're going to bring up things that you didn't think of, that we didn't think of. Take advantage of it. And you can do it for free with the free Zoom account with the 40-minute limit. So, okay. I would say thanks for everybody. I think that'll do it for here, unless, again, Ryan, you wanted Kathy to stay on for a bit, that we can maybe work something out. But thank you, everyone. We hopefully will be seeing you in January in person, or some of you at least. Thanks. Appreciate everything you're doing. Have a safe and happy and healthy holiday season.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.